Welcome to Podcast for Fun. This is a show where we dive into the passion, the process, and the journeys of creative storytellers as they bring their stories to life. I'm your host, Sophia, and today we are joined by a talented author, Richie Billing. Thank you so much for being here, Richie.
Thank you very much for having me, Sophia. I'm delighted to join you.
So let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your work.
I'm from a place called Liverpool. You may recognize the accent. Apologies if you can't understand me. I try and talk as slow as possible. But didn't really start out in a creative field. I was a lawyer for a while, a good few years, and while I was doing that job, got really unhappy, and I think it was because I wasn't doing something creative.
Mm.
So I ended up quitting that job to become a writer. And since then, I've been writing all types of stories. I write a lot of fantasy fiction, but a lot of stories that are about the issues that I see in the world and injustices, corruption, and things that really frustrate me that I wish could change. But I feel a bit powerless to change these things. So instead, I just write about them. And yeah, I've been doing that for about 10 years nearly.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
Yeah, this makes me feel old.
Why did you decide to become a lawyer?
I think it stems back to the injustices and feeling a strong sense of injustice. And I mean, I don't know if you know much about Liverpool, but like we are like a bit of a city outside of the rest of the country.
Mhm.
So we don't really see ourselves as being part of England. And it's because of like we've been sort of isolated and persecuted by governments and stuff. So Liverpool people, um, with a strong influence from Ireland as well, uh, very much are all about fighting for injustices, helping people who need help, and standing up against the big guy. So I think that just kind of filters into everything I do.
That's so respectable. That's so cool. You want to fight
Yeah.
the injustice for other people. That's selfless, dude. That's so nice. It's actually the first time I heard any of my guests say something like that. Usually they're like, "Oh, I want to be creative," which I also respect, but you have a different view to it.
Yeah, I think like I've always felt a need. I mean, it's nice to be creative and to create things that look beautiful or that like entertain us and stuff. But for me, the things that have stayed with me are the ones that have gone that step further and challenged something or told the truth about humanity or the way the world is. And I suppose because I've enjoyed that kind of art more. I try and do it as much as possible, but I don't know if obviously I've hit the mark as well as other people, but gotta try.
Well, I think it's better to try than never try at all, right? Because this is a bit of a redundant saying, but you only live once, so you gotta might as well try the things you actually want to do.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's a, people say it's a cliche, but it's probably one of the truest things ever.
Mm-hmm.
Time is the most valuable thing that we have, and we don't want to waste it.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's so easy to waste it these days. I feel
I
like there's
know,
so many useless entertainment, right?
I
That just
know. Sometimes it's okay. I mean, I've just came in from work and getting ready to chat with you, and I just spent 20 minutes just scrolling through videos on Instagram, and I know it's a waste of time, but at the same time, I understand that it helps me unwind. It takes my mind off things. So there are
yeah.
benefits to it, but I suppose it's a big problem when you sat there for 5, 6 hours doing the same thing over and over again. So
Mm-hmm.
you just gotta make sure that it doesn't become a problem.
Sometimes I do see things are like actually useful. I try to make it so that my explore page shows
Yeah.
me stuff that's actually useful for me. So I purposefully like say this is I'm interested in this to like videos that tell me how to be more productive or how to write a story or how to create a scene or how to draw. Just to
Yeah.
try to keep my wasting time hours not as little bit of a wasting time as possible. So, I try to follow script writing people. I want to become a film director, so I listen to a lot of
Nice.
film podcasts and stuff like that. So, keep trying to keep the wasteful time to a minimum, trying to make the most use out of my wasteful time. That's basically what I wanted to say.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's dead on.
I was wondering, did you always know that you were a creative person?
No, no, not at all. I never wanted to be a writer. I kind of just when I was searching for something in life, that was what I found. But I realized now that I probably was more of a creative person. I like problems because I like finding solutions to them.
Mm.
So I suppose that is a bit of a symptom of a creative mind. Um, but when I was in college and university, I liked essays, as weird as it sounds. I liked the assignment and the project and working on something every day, researching it and writing it, like bringing all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Mm.
So it was only when I left college, I started writing a script, funnily enough, a script,
Mm.
for a sitcom with my good friend, and we did it more for fun, but obviously we were hoping it went somewhere. But it was a lot harder back then. I mean, it's still hard now, but even harder back then.
Mm.
But then when we stopped doing that, I was just felt like a void, and I felt quite depressed. And I spent a lot of time reading fantasy books. Like I used
Mm.
to like love reading fantasy books when I was a teenager, and then decide like thought one day, I suppose, that like what these books have done for me, I would love to do for someone else, and I would love to have a go at writing something.
Mm.
And then yeah, once I started, I never stopped, and every day for about 10 years, I've been writing.
Dang, 10 years.
Yeah,
Was
you just
it?
kind of know when it feels right. You know what I mean? You just kind of this is what I want to do. Um, this is what makes me happy. It's a
I
hard
feel
thing to find.
I feel like you know when you do something willingly. Like no one has to pay you to do it. You just do it for fun.
Mm,
I think
yeah,
that's when I know like, oh, this thing is meant for me, right?
I agree. Yeah.
Was it a aggressive shift from lawyer to writer?
It was a worrying shift more because I went from having a salary to not having any and just living on savings. Um, and because I still didn't really feel confident enough to be a writer at that point,
Hmm.
um, I had to sit myself down. I was like, well, if you're going to do this, you've got to make sure that you maximize your time. So
Yeah.
throughout the day, you've got to be learning about writing. You've got to be doing practicing as much as possible, working on projects and stuff. So I found a really good college course by Brandon Sanderson, and it's all for free on YouTube, and it's a full creative writing class specifically designed for fantasy and
Hmm.
science fiction as well. So I just sat down, watched every one of them lectures, took notes as if I was going back to college,
Hmm.
and just went at it like that. And I think having that time to invest in something, it really did help because it gives you the freedom and the space to learn and to try things and to fail and to learn what works, what doesn't work. So yeah,
I feel like you can learn anything on YouTube these days.
yeah, it's amazing. It's one of the best things. It's like made education accessible to everybody, and I think that's probably the biggest perk to having it.
Hmm. So you didn't go to school to learn to write, right?
No, I know a lot of people do. Like I speak to writers who, like I was chatting to a guy the other day, and he was saying, "Oh, I had my first short story published when I was a teenager."
Hmm.
And then they go to college and they study creative writing or English literature or something like that. I didn't do any of that. I did a lot of writing in my law job, and
Hmm.
I I represented people who got like hurt at work. So it would be my job to tell their story, and I used to have to draft documents. I mean, that would tell the story, but they were pretty boring. But I quite enjoyed like creating the narratives and stuff. So I suppose I started in that job without realizing it.
I feel like personally for me, if you enjoyed writing it, someone else will enjoy reading it.
Mm, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think there's definitely something powerful when something there's a lot of quality to it, and it's something that the writer or the creator is passionate about and knows a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're learning something, but also you're gaining like I suppose if you that enthusiasm rubs off on you, don't you? And like I really like archaeology programs, which sounds really boring, but the people on the show are really enthusiastic about what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more that I like them and less about the archaeology kind of thing. So
Exactly.
yeah, so there's a lot to be said for writing what you love. And what I've done in the past is write things that I haven't really loved, and I've done more because it's a good idea at the time or it was an opportunity. And the book that I've got coming out in March, on the
Mm-hmm.
22nd of March, it's called Together We Rise. It's the first project that I'm releasing, which is something that I've loved from the first word to the last. So it's made a massive difference, and hopefully it will see with readers that they find it enjoyable as well.
Can you explain a little bit, like a teaser or something for the
Oh
viewers?
yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So basically, in short, it's a story about injustice and corruption, and fighting against it, and how we all hold the power to shape the world that we want to live in, even though it doesn't feel like we do. And basically, the story is, it's a revolution against a corrupt government, and it's a reflection of my frustrations with the world for the last few years. But the story itself came from a novel that I wrote 7 or 8 years ago, and I kind of taken a big chunk of that to use in a more recent novel, and this was the part that was left over, and I was like, that was my favorite part of the story. It got my favorite characters in, and I was like, I can't leave it.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of wanted to do something with it, but wasn't quite sure like what the purpose was, what the point was.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was feeling all this frustration and this anger, and seeing the direction that the world is going just makes you feel even worse. So, like I said, I felt helpless, felt powerless, and I've coupled the two projects together. Um, and it's only a novella, but I've tried to make it different. So there's 8 perspectives, 8 parts to the story, and
Mm-hmm.
each character takes the story to a certain point. Then the next character takes over and carries it to the next point. So
Mm-hmm.
like a little relay race all throughout.
Oh my God, so
Um,
cool.
and it just tells the story of this revolution, this uprising over the course of 24 hours. And at the same time, what I wanted to do is to like point out corruption and injustices and the problems that you have in like a capitalist society that is completely unchecked, which is be Donald Trump's utopia. Um, and just showing people like this is the reality for a lot of people in the world, and it can be the reality for you. It's not just a fantasy story.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the reasons why people want it to be like this. And you've got the ability and the strength to do something about it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's beautiful. When did the passion for like fighting against injustice like rise in you?
I suppose because wanted to become a lawyer, I always wanted to be a lawyer because I didn't like the idea of someone doing something bad and getting away with it.
Mm.
Um, and I've kind of like not really. Obviously, I never went to like criminal law where I was putting criminals away or anything like that. helping people who basically needed a bit of a shoulder to lean on at a
Mhm.
time when they need it. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed the job, but it wasn't for me. And but I'm still really passionate about injustices and things like that. I just want the world to be a fair place, and it really annoys me when it's not, because to
Mhm.
me it's so obvious.
Yeah.
But, but obviously everyone's got their own opinions, and people get corrupted and swayed by things like money and status and stuff like that. So
Well, yeah.
it feels like an impossible dream, but you've got to keep fighting for it, haven't you?
Well, I feel like if you, I mean, there's always going to be people who are, you know, negative or they like seek external validation by like being rich and being, successful, not considering themselves or other people. But I think just by you creating those stories that there'll be a little less than there was if your story wasn't there.
Definitely, yeah. That's a really good point. And what I'd love to see is more people across all art forms trying to do this kind of stuff. Because to me, it's a culture shift. It's like we have to like change the way we think and feel on so many levels, and a lot of the influence comes through cultural things. Like, I mean, that's, I hate to call it culture, but I suppose it is. It's like a podcasting, but it's like far right podcasting, which appeals to like young men, which
Mm.
drives them into like racism and misogyny and stuff like that. And like it's like a really negative culture, and there needs to be more positive stuff. There needs to be like people obviously calling out that and showing people the the much more sane alternative. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversial I don't know how to explain it. Like, there's a lot of crazy opinions out there. But I guess that because it's like so flashy, people get drawn to it. It's kind of like rage baiting when you don't like something, but you watch it anyways because, it rises emotions in you when you see it, right?
Mm,
That's why it's so popular, which is problem because then there's positive stuff where people don't feel much like you don't feel much when they see some positive thing. You just think it's a good thing. So it's
yeah,
not as impactful or memorable as the negative stuff.
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. When you said you read fantasy books when you were younger, do you have an example of like one of the books that like inspired you the most or like was most,
Yeah,
impacted you the most?
I think one of the first books that I can like going back a long time now. But one of the first books I can remember when I was a young teenager was The Hobbit, and I just remember absolutely loving that. And I grew up when Harry Potter was all the rage, and the films were starting to come out, and everyone was reading the books.
Hmm.
So loved all the Harry Potter books. And then I think when I was about 13 or 14, the Lord of the Rings films came out. So
Hmm.
I'd never read the Lord of the Rings. It was a bit too much for me at that age. But the films made the story so much more accessible. And I think as soon as I seen them films, that was me. I was hooked on fantasy stuff. And
Hmm.
I've always kind of stayed with it. I know a lot of people don't like fantasy. They think it's cheap and they can't really get to grips with it being another world with other things. But I just love the ability to do whatever you want, the absolute maximum freedom possible when it comes to writing.
Hmm. And you can do whatever that's my favorite part too. There's no limit. The only limit is your imagination, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So
So that's my favorite.
is the Lord of the Rings series your favorite movies? Or what is your favorite movie?
Yeah, yeah. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Have you ever seen that?
No, but you should like give me a bit of a description.
Oh, right. So it's a long film. It's from
Mm,
1963, I think, and it's like a spaghetti western by director called Sergio Leone. It's got Clint Eastwood
Hmm.
and Lee Van Cleef and Eli Wallach.
Hmm.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. They're the three characters. So there's the good, which is
Hmm.
Clint Eastwood, the bad, which is Lee Van Cleef, and the ugly.
Hmm.
So it's basically a story of these three guys. They get information that there's a massive chest of gold,
Hmm.
and they're all fighting against each other to try and get to this gold first. Um, so it there's more to it than that, but it's if you're really into your films, for me, what makes it so powerful is it's not a film about dialogue. Like there's very little dialogue in the film, and it's all about body language, cinematic shots, the music, and yeah, it's when the first time I saw it, it absolutely blew me away. But going back to Lord of the Rings, the final film, the scene where the Riders of Rohan emerge over the hill um, to save Gondor.
Hmm.
That always brings a tear to my eye. Like that, I love that.
You know, that's so interesting that you say like no dialogue. How do you transcribe that to writing, which is just words?
Oh yeah, it'd be difficult. But the good thing, I mean, the benefits that I've always found with writing over anything else really is that you can get into characters' heads.
Hmm.
So you're watching a character, and all you can really do is feed off their expressions and the body language.
Hmm.
But with books and stuff, you can go a step further and you can explore what is going on between their ears and find out like the thought processes and stuff. And you get really good writers who are very good at diving into them emotional struggles because, to be honest, that's what writing is. And this is what I've learned recently, and what I try and advise other people to do is a story is a character's emotional journey as they're going through a hell. And
Yeah.
it's what makes it interesting is the emotional response and
Hmm.
how they change over time because we are just emotional creatures. We have an emotional response to everything first, and then we might rationalize and think, oh, yeah, that's okay. But yeah, when you think of it like that, I find that your characters are a lot more alive, and it can be easier to write as well.
Hmm. I feel, wait, does that mean that your stories have a lot of internal conflict?
Um, I'd say not all stories. It depends on the character because, like, say some people like just don't have any sort of cares or they're very content with who they are. But
Hmm.
some characters, like the internal conflict, can be the most interesting part about them. So I always try and do is try and get to know a character as much as possible. Um, and a couple of ways you can do this. Um, one of my favorites is to think of the deepest, darkest secret, and they call it the secret snapshot approach.
Hmm.
So if you could take a snapshot on like a Polaroid uh, camera of this moment that the like most fearful of or the most guarded memory in the life, um, they would have a picture and they would lock it away and they wouldn't show it to anyone. And that
Hmm.
would be the secret snapshot. So if you can get into like that level of development with characters, you kind of know who that person is. You know what motivates them, what they want, how they're going to go about getting it. Um, and the more you start to think about these things and how it can shape a person and who they are, the better. A lot of it comes from childhood and friends and upbringings and stuff like that. Um, it's funny. A lot of people, you might notice this yourself.
Hmm.
You might have like a distinctive personality, like someone who's quite loud, um, talks over people, and you think, oh, I wonder why that person's like that. And oftentimes you can trace it back to being ignored as a child by the parents or something.
Hmm.
and little things like that, traumatic moments in people's lives that can shape who you are and your behavior massively, kind of.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what it's psychology we're talking about now, and I really like it.
Oh my God, I love psychology too. I keep listening to psychology books when I'm like drawing my comics and stuff like that.
Nice. That's
Do
really
you have
cool.
an do you have an example of a character and like the trauma that you like, I guess, assigned onto them, which like shaped their personality?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll give an example through from the current book that I'm doing, Together We Rise, which I suppose
Hmm.
I don't give it a spoiler. It was not a spoiler, really. So the main character, even though it's 8 parts, the main character in the story is someone called Till, and
Him?
Till, well, it's like short for Tilia.
How do you spell
So
it?
it's Tillia. I
Tilia.
just
Okay.
made, yeah, I just made it up.
No, it's a unique name. I like it.
Yeah, nice one. So um, she's behind the revolution. She's orchestrated it all, and part of the main reason why she's done it is to
Mhm.
liberate herself from it of a husband. So she was kind of swooned by this guy and also encouraged by like a dying father to marry this man. And then as soon as it happened, he changed and he's very abusive, very controlling, like very hateful on all kinds of nasty levels.
Mhm.
And it sends her into a depression, and she feels very helpless, very alone, very isolated. Um, and she, in a roundabout way, finds out that her husband orchestrated the death of her father. Um, so she goes back and tries to solve this like crime essentially. Um, and as she's going through this process, she comes across a woman being attacked and assaulted by a police officer, and her husband is a police officer. And given what she's been through, she ends up like attacking the police officer, killing him. And it's at the moment where she kills him and she realizes she's killed him and she's holding the knife, that she feels for the first time in a long time like alive again, and that she's powerful and that she's in control. Um, and this sets her off on a journey of vigilantism where she starts like taking out drug dealers, taking out more corrupt police officers, and creating a bit of a reputation as like a bit of which she's called Shadow,
Mhm.
and people fear her. So she lives this alter ego as this sort of abused wife, but then at nighttime she's a murdering vigilante,
She's
who
like the
ends up
female
leading a
Batman.
revolution. Exactly, yeah. But that's an example of how like something that had happened in her life or was happening in her life
Mhm.
influenced her actions and what she wanted to do. And yeah, she's one of my favorite characters that I've ever created, and that's why I was like, I can't like let that story go to waste. So that's why I wanted to do something with it, and it's worked out really well because I've been able to explore a lot of the issues that I'm passionate about right now, and yeah, it's been an exciting creative process.
Dang, that's so cool.
Well,
Oh
thank
my
you.
God.
But yeah,
How,
that's
hmm? Sorry?
sorry. I was no, you carry on there. I was just gonna
No, no,
say
it's
that
okay.
that's
I was
just
just
me.
gonna go on to a different question, so keep going.
No, I was just gonna say it's just like one example of what you can do as a writer. You create all of these things in your mind. You know what I mean? You can you can start with a character and think, oh yeah, this character doesn't like this. I always think I went to school with a guy who had big eyes, like very, very large eyes. So anytime anyone mentioned his eyes, he'd start crying, you know what I mean? It's because he would be getting mocked for having big eyes and he was just sensitive to it. So you can say, oh, this character doesn't like this, and then just it's like tracing the story back, asking why, and then gives you the interesting answers.
Yeah. I never thought about it, but I was like thinking of my story while you were explaining that.
Yeah,
And I really like internal conflicts and like tough choices. When characters have to make really tough choices. And I
yeah,
was realizing that those choices are tough because it's like placed upon that character. If it was placed upon people like someone else with a different personality, like the situation would be different, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like
exactly.
for example, I'm not sure if you watched this like Spider-Man movie, but there was a scene when he had to choose between his girlfriend and a bus full of kids.
That's a
And
classic philosophy one.
yes. And I think, well, obviously, like if both of those like the girlfriend and the bus full of kids are people he didn't know, he would like easily choose the bus full of people. But because he has a connection with his girlfriend, it
Mm,
becomes like a strong dilemma, right?
yeah,
But
it's
also, if he was a selfish person or if his relationship with his girlfriend was different, it would be a completely different situation.
yeah, I know. It's I love them kind of predicaments. It's
Mhm.
always like anything that makes you think. I think Stephen King's really good at it. I don't know. Have you ever seen the film The Mist or read the novella?
I'm not, but explain it to me.
It's just the ending that makes me most intrigued. So basically the story is everyone's going about their life in this little
Mhm.
sleepy town in America, and this mist descends, and when people go out in the mist, they get killed by monsters. So there's a group of people who get stuck in a supermarket
Hmm.
and they can't go outside unless they're going to try and risk fighting these monsters. And the monsters are starting to get inside as well. People inside are starting to go a bit mad. And a group of them decide, all right, we need to get out of here. And what we're going to do, we're going to try and get in the car and we'll just drive for as far as we can and try and get out of the mist.
Uh-huh.
So they end up getting in the car, driving. Um, and there's five of them in the car. I don't think they have any supplies.
Yeah.
Um, and they run out of petrol or gas and the car stops. They're still in the mist. They can still hear the monsters all around them. They're not being attacked, by the way, but the, the monsters are there. Um, so they all kind of stop, and the only thing that they've got is a gun, and there's four bullets left. So they're all looking at each other and like basically make a decision on what to do next. So, like, what would you do in this situation? If you're trapped in this mist, you've been trapped in this mist for days, you've got no supplies, and you've got no way of escaping it as far as you know. What would you do?
I probably die. Um, I don't know. Like maybe I'll try to see. Is it like not visible at all? Or is it just
Yeah,
like,
it's pretty thick fog, so you
oh my
can't really
God.
see anything, but you can hear the monsters walking around you, so they could come and get you at any time. And it's just you, like you and four other people in the car, and the only thing you've got is a gun with four bullets.
Maybe I'll try to take two bullets and go as far as I can and scream whatever I hear, like whatever I see, so that I can kind of give like the people in the car a bit of a map of like the surroundings
Oh,
and see
it's
like there's a house, there's a tree right here, and I die because I only have two bullets.
yeah,
But that'll probably be my the only plan I can think of in that moment. And I'm just thinking off the
yeah.
top of my head right now. What would you do?
It's well, I don't know. I kind of feel like I would have waited like for as long as possible until like we were all gonna basically die of starvation. But do you want me to tell you what ends up happening in the film?
Yes.
There's a spoiler alert for anyone who's listening who hasn't seen it.
Spoiler
So,
alert. Go watch the video, go watch the movie and come back. I'm getting the spoiler though.
so the guy with the gun
Mm.
decides to shoot the four of the people in the car one of whom is his son, right? And then
Why?
I don't know. And then he gets out the car and goes towards the monsters as if to say, like, oh, I can't believe what I've just had to do. Kill me now. And then as he goes towards the monsters, he's like shouting at them for the monsters to attack. And then the mist starts to disappear. And through the mist, an army tank comes through. And then the mist disappears a bit more. And loads of soldiers are walking through. And basically, the situation's back under control.
But why would you kill the four other people in the car?
Exactly. But they all thought that it was the end. They had no hope. So the kindest thing was to commit suicide. And that guy did basically the hard job of shooting them all, including his own son.
What the hell?
But then he gets out the car and then it's fine.
Oh my God. My
So
plan was better.
that's
My
that.
plan's
Yeah,
better.
your plan was good. Yeah, and my plan would have worked as well. But that's Stephen King for you.
Oh my God. I didn't know he made that much messed up story. Like I knew he made horror stories, but I actually, man, maybe I should watch Stephen King films.
He
Like
just loves the twists at the end, the mad twists that you just don't expect. So if you're into that kind of thing, he's your man.
I was so shocked when he told me like, "Oh yeah, he shot the four people in the car." I was like, "What? Why?" My
When
God.
I saw at the end, I just laughed. Like I think my girlfriend was watching it as well, and she was shocked, but I was just laughing. I just thought it was so bizarre.
It is. Do you like movies with open-ended like endings?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think you need to bring some kind of finality to a story, but you can always leave things a bit open.
Have you ever watched Inception?
A long time ago, yeah. I'm
How
not
do you
really
feel
into
about it?
them kind of like films.
Why
Is
not?
Inception's the one with Matthew McConaughey?
No, that's different. This
Is
is the
that the
one with,
space one?
no, I think that's Interstellar.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's
Talking
Interstellar.
about talking about the dream one. Have you ever watched the one with Leonardo DiCaprio where he's
Yeah, I
like,
have watched that, yeah. Mad. Do you like that kind of film?
yeah, I like movies like that. Like, the ones that like with open-ended endings, like you don't know. Basically, I liked how like you couldn't tell if this is another spoiler, guys. Go watch Inception right now. Where you can't tell if it ended as a dream or if he actually came back to the real world. I think that's so cool. And then the reason it
Yeah,
works is because it's like they add the meaning behind that little spinning top. And because people know what it is, they're like, oh, if this top falls over, that means it's the real world. And if it keeps
yeah.
spinning, it's the dream. So it never falls over, and then the movie just ends. And I just think
Uh,
it's brilliant.
that's
I,
really
I want to
cool.
make I want to make endings like that.
Yeah. I think that's what I really like about short stories because a good short story, there should be more story to come after, and it should make you think about what's to come after.
Hmm.
And that's a really good example of how you can do it with little open ending.
You've written short stories, right? I remember reading them.
Yeah, I really like writing short stories. You can do
Can you
all
give us
different funny
I
things
mean,
with short
a
stories.
little description of one of your short stories?
Yeah, so I actually for the novella, I use some of the characters or bring some of the characters that I've already written um
Mhm.
back into the story. So I have a fantasy world which I've called Tavia, and I just like writing short stories, random short stories set in this world. It could be from different parts of the world, different periods of time, just different characters. And sometimes I'll write other stories and knit them all together and make drop little Easter eggs in and connections and stuff. Um, but I wrote a short story a long time ago called The Pigeon Catchers. It's
Mhm.
about a young girl and a little brother, a slightly older brother, and they're trying to get money to buy medicine for the sick mother,
Mhm.
and the the only really way that they know that's honest to to make money is to catch pigeons and sell them to the cheap cafes and stuff, which make like pigeon stew and stuff like that, pigeon pie.
Mhm.
So the story is about them essentially trying to get the money, and it's quite a sad ending. I won't say too much more, but Mal ends up being a character in the novella as well, and it's the novella set like a couple of years later, after that short story. So if you're wondering what happens to her after reading that short story, then you'll see how she got on, and then what sort of future held. And yeah, it's a nice way to sort of carry the story on. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
we were saying before about leaving it open ended, and that's what the good thing about short stories is. Like I've carried that story on in a novella, like 7 years later. So
Have you
it's
ever
good.
written a short story and then it expanded into like a whole novel or something?
Yeah, that there's a real danger of doing that. um,
Why?
I think because a lot of people, I was chatting to a short story writer for my podcast actually,
Hmm.
and we were talking about this point first. It's because a lot of people do this because they don't really understand what a short story is.
Hmm.
Um, and you end up writing about a character, and then you start doing something interesting, and then next thing you know, it's like 10,000 words long.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas like people think a short story is just like like a normal story, but just shorter, like shortened down. But it's not. It's more of like a moment or a point of change in someone's life, like a defining moment where they have to make a choice, and it's these interesting choices which make for the most exciting short stories, I think.
Hmm. I feel like when you want to write a short story, a lot of people's biggest mistake is they're trying to put too much into something short. Like they have
Mm.
this huge idea and they can't condense it, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
like
why it's quite good to write even shorter stories or flash fiction or micro fiction. It's like 100 words.
that's so short.
Yeah. Well, there's
Never.
the most famous like tiny story, I suppose, is Hemingway's one. Is it? It's called. It's baby's shoes, never worn. Baby's shoes for sale, never worn. So it's like that's the story. But if you think
Baby
about baby's shoes for sale, never worn.
baby shoes for sale, never worn.
Yeah.
Does that
Like
mean
if
like
well, it makes you think, doesn't it? Well, what happened to the baby? Why didn't she wear the shoes? What? So that's 5 or 6 words. That's the story.
oh yeah, because then you start thinking like, was it a miscarriage? What happened?
Exactly. You write the story yourself.
I remember reading psychology, like in a psychology book, that like people's imaginations are stronger than reality. Like, when you're excited for something, that excitement is stronger than when you actually do a thing and it's fun,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's so crazy.
So, like, when you write a story, if you keep these like little pockets for people to fill in themselves, I feel that it makes it extra interesting. But there's always a balance with that, right? If you don't put in enough, people are gonna be like, "What the hell is going on here? I'm so confused." But you gotta like you
Yeah.
gotta put a little bit, and you're like, "Huh? What happened?" Like when a character dies off screen, and you're so sure he died, but then he appears because he died off screen. So you're like, that character did not die. It's off screen. He probably survived somehow, or they maybe want to bring him back later.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you write stories as do you think of that plot as you're writing it, or do you have a bit of like a outline and then you follow it?
Depends, really. I think most of the time, because I don't really have a lot of free time to write, what I tend to do is I'll come up with an idea, And I'll just interrogate that idea in my mind and just question it, think about all different variables, different ways of telling the story. Um, Most of the time, the problem I have is I've got a good concept for something, but I don't have an ending.
Uh,
So unless I'm happy with the ending, I won't really write it.
yeah.
Just because it's not a complete story, and I don't want to set off writing 4,000 words just to get to the end and just be like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
Um, so I need to find basically all the parts or the pieces of the puzzle, and then the act of writing is making the jigsaw, putting them all in place. But for me personally, I need to know I've got the pieces before I can start writing. And
That's a good way
I
to
don't
explain it.
need to, yeah, I don't really need to know the level of detail. Like I won't need to know every aspect of the story, but just enough, and I'll figure it out along the way.
I'm kind of curious, how does the people around you feel about your writing?
I've been very lucky though. The people that, like my mother, obviously coming home and telling her that I'm quitting my job as a lawyer
Hmm.
to be a writer.
Did it shock her?
um, yeah, but she's always been very understanding, and I think our family generally they've been a bit more creative, so we've kind of pursued creative things. Like my brother's a YouTuber, for example.
Oh wow.
Um, so yeah, it's she's got a lot of patience anyway, a lot of understanding. I'm a
Mhm.
partner as well, very understanding. Obviously writing. A lot of the time you're on your own. You need alone time to concentrate. You need extra time to do nice things like chat to you on your show.
Yep.
And do all the extra things that come with writing, and it can be a lot of time. It's like I basically work two full-time jobs, to say, because writing is I do so much. So when I get home from work, um, I'll have an hour's break, and then I'll start work again.
So
But I
you're
don't see it as work. You know what I mean? This is what I
yeah,
want
yeah,
to
yeah.
do. I have to do the 9 to 5 to get to the bit that I want to do.
How do you balance it then?
um, it's hard to really balance things. Sometimes, like there was a point last year when I just lost any sense of writing time. I was just taking on too much,
Mm.
and I just had to completely scale things back. And sometimes you do just need to have a little look, take a step back and look at everything that you've got going on and think, is everything working as well as it could be? Am I giving enough time to this? Am I giving enough time to that? And yeah, I've got a pretty decent routine. Everyone has their own way of working. I'm quite lucky that work better in the night times. Like
Hmm.
some people get up at like 4 a.m. before work and do like 2 hours, 3 hours of writing, and I'm like, bloody hell, I'd be fighting to stay awake.
Bro, I can't do that. When I wake up, my sister has a good way of explaining this. I'm defrosting, you know? So I'm really like, oh, I can't think. I can't write something. I can't use my brain in the morning. I have to
Yeah,
drink coffee and you know, melt before I can actually be like, ah, ready to use my brain now. That
yeah,
first hour of the day, I do something that's mindless. Like I'm drawing characters, but I purposefully avoid the ex face because I feel like the body doesn't have expressions, right? But the face, you need to use your brain and ha make it
mm,
look good. But so I
yeah.
just you just see a lot of faceless files in my computer. And you're like, what the hell is this? I'm like, I drew them in the morning. I'm gonna add the face later, you know?
Nice.
What kind of routine do you follow?
So when I'm drafting stories, I'll try and do it quite quickly. I usually write in sessions. So if I had a full day to myself and I was writing, I'd usually get up, do a session then, for maybe 2 or 3 hours,
Mhm.
have a break for maybe 2 or 3 hours, then do another 2 or 3 hour session, have another break, and then another session. So I'd probably work for over the course of the day from like 10 a.m. to maybe 12 a.m. the next night. but I'd be having breaks throughout that.
Hmm.
Um, I just find that that works better for me. If I'm into a job, I will stick with it for hours on end, and it feels like an addiction. Like I've got to get this finished, and I want to get it finished. Um, but most of the time, like I'll be ready for a break after about 2 hours. So
That's the
you
type of
just
addiction
gotta.
I want. I need to stop procrastinating. I don't procrastinate that much that like inhibits my work that much, but I just know that I could be more productive, you know?
I don't know. I think we're always harsher on ourselves, aren't we? Like I feel like I procrastinate a lot, as well. So I totally get what you're saying there. But when you stop at the end of the day and look at what you've done, and you think, yeah, you've done this, you've done that, you've done that. Think, oh yeah, I've actually worked really hard today, and I've got a lot done. So don't be too hard on yourself, is all I'd say. And something that really helps me is to just have a to-do list for every
Hmm.
day.
Yeah.
So I need to know, I know then I've got to like do plan the whole week ahead, spread the jobs out over the course of the week, try and do a couple of jobs a day. And as long as you've got everything done in that week that you wanted to get done, you can't be annoyed with yourself or frustrated with yourself because you've done what you set out to do. Just don't
True.
make the to-do list too big.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you said your main job was, what was it, a creative writing teacher?
I do a little bit of creative writing teaching on the side, but I'm actually I'm in digital marketing, so I do search engine optimization, which
Ooh.
is all about like basically the science of Google searches, getting to the top
Mhm.
of Google. So it's helped a lot with marketing, my writing and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
of course.
Um, but 5 years ago, it's n- it's not what I set out to do. I joined the company as a copy editor because I wanted to work with words.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, I'm now doing
Yeah.
SEO, which I don't mind.
Is it fun?
If you like, I see it as a game because essentially you're trying to get to the number one spot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a game, it's like a leaderboard. And if you see it like that, you can make it fun.
True. I feel like if you see everything as a game, I try to see life as a game, you know? You're
Yeah.
like it's so funny whenever I go to the gym, I feel like I'm like filling in a bar, you know, to like
Yeah, that's a good way to
clock
look
or
at it.
whatever
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like when I miss it, it goes down. So I want to keep it up, right? So I keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. The only problem with life is that you don't respond when you die.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I hear like your routine like of everything like from waking up like on an average work day?
Yeah. So I wake up quite late. Get into work around 9, get home about 6. Like I say, I have a break for about 45 minutes, an hour, and then I'll work again. It's about 7 or 8 o'clock till sometimes midnight, sometimes early hours. Sometimes if I'm not feeling it, I'll stop about 10.
Hmm.
But it just depends what you've got on, what you need to do, if you've got commitments, and what like mentally you feel capable of doing. Like I'm like I say, I might see me drinking an energy drink. I sometimes you are tired when you get home from work, but you know you've got stuff to do. So
Yeah.
you have to have another coffee or you have to have an energy drink to see you through for the next few hours. It's probably not healthy, but I enjoy it and I want to be alert and I want to do these things. So just gotta push yourself.
Hmm.
Really, the only probably the biggest thing I've learned about writing is you only get what you put in.
Yes,
And
definitely.
you can sit here and you can say, oh, I'm gonna write a novel, it's gonna be a bestseller. But the difference between all them people who say that and the people who do it, they've sat down and they've typed it and they've edited it. And it takes like my first novel took 3 years.
Oh wow.
Um with all the writing and the editing. And I did another novel which took 2 years and I'm still working on it.
Hmm.
And it only happens if you sit down and do it. No one's going to do it for you.
How did you get your work published?
So a lot of short stories. It's quite a nice simple process. So you write something, do a bit of research on who might like it, and then you
Mm.
just pitch it to publishers and stuff like that. And short story writing is hard because um there's a lot of competition. There's not an awful lot of magazines and publishers out there. And sometimes, like, I was chatting to someone who works at a publisher and they had 400 submissions for one spot. So you've got to stand out against 400 people. So
0.4%.
yeah, so it can be tough. Um, that's why it's always good to remember why you do it, and it's because you love it. You love creating things. You love to create things that other people are going to enjoy as well.
Hmm.
Um, the first novel I've done, um, that was a commissioned story. So, a publisher created a shared fantasy world, and what they wanted to do was get lots of different writers to write all different stories, but then connect them all together. So it's quite cool. So if you read one novel, you could go and read another novel, which would be a different story, but it would be in the same world, and there might be
Oh,
some
that's
references
interesting.
to that first novel. So it's quite a cool idea. And I applied for that because I thought it was a good opportunity, and it was a good opportunity at the time as well. Um, and wrote that story, but it wasn't mine, if you get me.
Yeah.
Um, there was a set of rules that I had to follow.
Hmm.
There was a history I had to adhere to,
Yeah.
and it was good fun. I enjoyed it. But it wasn't really mine, if you get me.
It feels like a fan fiction for some reason. That's like most fan fiction. They
Yeah,
like based off of a world that already exists, right?
yeah.
How did you? I'm just curious because you said you were a lawyer and then you decided to become a writer, but and it's amazing that you like just do it yourself. So like, was there an objective? Like how did you start and go about it?
I realized I think when I quit my job that I wasn't very good and I needed to get better.
Hmm.
And it's not a thing that a lot of people like to admit. So I do think with writing, especially because it's a difficult thing to do. There's a lot that goes into creating images and then transferring them images into someone else's mind and building
Hmm.
that connection. And there's a real skill to it. So you need to study and you need to master your craft. You need to practice all the time.
Yeah.
Some people will get lucky and they can just do it, which is amazing. But for some, you need to do the work. That's the hardest thing.
Oh my God, your
And
cat.
oh yeah, she wants to go out now. But yeah, you've got to do it. That's the main thing. It isn't like I said before, like finishing a novel, writing a novel. No one's going to do it for you, and
Yeah.
it's the same with any creative thing. I mean, you like to draw, like you've probably put hours and hours and hours into drawing to get as good as you are,
Hmm.
and to like you say, listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos and learning new skills. It's like you've got to invest, and it's a really good time to learn any skill, any age now because you've got YouTube, you've got podcasts, you've got all these amazing free resources at your disposal.
Yes. Did you have a plan to succeed that you were just like following kind of?
No, I don't have a plan. I want to succeed and I want to make a full-time living out of writing.
Mm.
Um, I have more of an idea on how to go about it now because when I started, I was kind of like, oh, you need to get an agent and you need to get a publisher and you need to basically get the big book deals, which is true. You do need the big book deal, but um, I've spoken to a lot of authors who've got book deals, and some of them have published 10 books and they're
Mm.
still working like part-time jobs. Um, so what I'm doing now is I'm trying to go completely self-sufficient and I've moved to a subscription-based service, like on Patreon.
Hmm.
So to me, that's the objective now is to grow that and to build a following who I can
Yeah.
connect with directly. I can share my stories with directly, and they were like basically support me that more directly, and they get better prices, they get better experience, they get more added extras and stuff like that. And that's the only way I can see being a full-time writer. So that's the plan.
Okay. How are you gonna, so is it social media? Is that how you're gonna get your patrons and people? Do you have a following right now?
I've only launched it maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. I've got quite a few free subscribers. I'm trying to get more people to pay. Please pay.
Give Richie money, come on, guys.
Yeah,
Link
I
in
got
bio.
eat. Gotta eat this month.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but uh, main way of strategy. I'm not good on social media. Um, I probably just I missed my generation has probably just missed. Like we got Facebook and all that, but we started with all the really rubbish social media platforms like MySpace and Bebo.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So when TikTok came along, by that point, I can't be bothered with this. I don't even know what it's about. But I have used it a little bit, and I've used them all. But I use a lot of email marketing methods. So I've got quite a big mailing list, email people all the time. Good way to connect with people. Really
Hmm.
do recommend emails. But social media, no. What about you? Are you big on social media?
Well, I try to, but to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of it. You know what I recommend though? I think you should try going to real life like conventions if you can.
Nice. Yeah, I do go to Fantasy Con, which is all over the country every year. But yeah, I do agree. Yeah, conventions are amazing because you just get to meet people like you as well, don't you?
Exactly. Have you ever like gone to them and spoken to, panel people, like people who are like selling their own work? Or have you ever tried
Yeah,
selling your own work there?
I've not tried selling any of my work there. I've been on a few panels, just like talking like this, just sharing insights and bits of information,
Hmm.
discussing things, different perspectives on things. And you do meet some really nice people there as well. Like met some authors that I really love. Got to shake their hand and tell them thank you for writing good books.
Yes. Yes. Did you ever learn anything like super valuable from them?
Yeah, definitely. Like especially the last convention I went to, was a short story panel.
Mhm.
Um, and I just made so many notes, and it got me really excited to write short stories again. And yeah, I've since then I've taken that advice and I've written some short stories and I've gotten them published as well. So definitely that advice works.
What were the advices?
So the main one that worked for me was to think about structures. So like there's all different ways you can tell a short story. And one of the ones that I experimented with and did get published was um, telling a story in the form of a to-do list over the course of a week. So what I tried to do was mix in a few of the mundane things. It was all from the perspective of a goblin.
A
So just
golf?
mixed in, yeah, goblin. So it's like a to-do list for a goblin
Uh-huh.
for the week. So um each day there'd be like a few like mundane things, but then there'd be strands of like subplots that would pop up each day. So like he was having like an argument with his wife and he was trying to get her back on side. So he like bought her a necklace and he was getting another goblin to make a necklace for her. And then you get to see a bit of a reaction like a few days later.
Hmm.
But then there was a big crisis unfolded and
Hmm.
you don't really get to an idea of you only really get an idea of what has happened um just through these little snippets of what he's got to do to fix the problem. So you just get like the solution, you don't know what the problem is. So
That that's so weird. But like, I've never heard of it like that. So you don't show the problem, but you just like kind of show the solution.
Yeah, so it's just them trying to fix the problem. So, for example, in the story, the goblins end up attacking the humans, like the
Mm-hmm.
human town. And then the humans the next day fight back and attack the goblin town. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about the fallout of each of them nights. And then the next morning he does a fresh to-do list and he's like, all right, we need to bury 12 people. So we need people to dig graves. We've got people who are injured and wounded, and we need to get more medicine. So he sends people out foraging. And then
And
you
then,
get to sort of pick, you sort of work out and fill in the gaps of like, oh, I wonder what's happened. I wonder what the battle was like, that kind of
you're
thing.
like, oh, I wonder who won. Did the goblins win or did the people win?
Well, the story's a little bit open ended, so
You should
I
send
don't
that to
know.
me. I want to read it.
Yeah, it's only about 700 words as well.
Yeah, it's short. Yeah, I'll read it like that. I remember
Yeah.
my friend sent me a short story, and his was very open-ended too. It was like about this guy obsessed with kittens, and then he didn't really figure out why, and then he hated this girl who like didn't like kittens but liked cats. So he's like, no, they're different. And I don't know how to describe that story, but he was sending it to me. I have a bit of a problem though. When people send me, like when my friends send me their stories, I'm I'm critical, but in a way to want to help them, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to um give someone constructive criticism. I just don't give it to them when they don't ask for it. I don't say
there's
anything.
there's no point giving feedback if it's not honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't lie though. I don't say like, "Oh, this is the best thing I've ever written, like I've ever read." If it's not, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Do you ever get comments and does it ever affect your writing?
Yeah, sometimes I just have to remind myself not to react and just to remember everyone's got their own opinions of things and everyone's allowed to disagree. Um, Even if it's something stupid. Like like one person commented on one of my books once, gave it a 1 star review because it said there was no pictures in it. So I
That's
was like, oh,
stupid. It's a book.
it's not a picture book.
Yeah.
So what you just have to remember, all right, whatever. It's their opinion. Leave them to it.
What's the most useful? You said you watched lectures on YouTube, right?
hmm
What was the most useful thing that you use all the time from those lectures?
And the world building advice is quite good from there. So the best way to think about building the world is to split it into two parts. You've got your physical parts of the world, so it's like your mountains and your rivers and your oceans and what your continents look like and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
the second part is all the cultural things, which is basically the man-made elements.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that's a nice, easy way to break it down. But aside from them lectures, I read the book a few years ago now by a Hungarian playwright called Lajos Egri,
Mhm.
and the book's called The Art of Dramatic Writing. And I'd read, well, I've got more books on writing than I have any other book. I've read a lot, but when I read this one, it all just made sense in like such a profound way. And then ever since then, I've felt a lot more confident in writing and the theory of writing. But something that I really use all the time was his approach to creating characters, which he called the bone structure.
Mhm.
And it's a simple questionnaire, but it looks at 3 dimensions, he calls them.
Mhm.
Um, there's the first, which is like physical, so it's like your physical appearance, height, weight, gender, eye color, stuff like that. The second one is the sociological impacts. So
Mhm.
that's everything to do with like your upbringing, like what friends you had, where you went to school, where you grew up, and thinking about like how that has impacted the person. And then usually, what will happen is what the product of the physical and the product of the sociological. create the third dimension, which is the psychological. And
Mm-hmm.
this is another part of the questionnaire which really enables you to get into the character's head and to understand how they think and what motivates them. So
Hmm.
the I think it's a quote from Egri. He says, by doing this or going to these lengths, you learn not just what a character wants for breakfast, but why they want it. And it's the why
Uh,
which is important in understanding the character. And basically, if you do this simple questionnaire, by the end of it, you'll have like a three-dimensional character, like an almost like a living person. So yeah, I really like that approach as well.
I never thought of that, honestly. I don't even know if I can answer all those questions for my character. I mean, I can. Now I'm thinking about it right
It's
now. I
interesting, yeah.
never thought about answering them, but that's so interesting. I remember watching a video, you know the South Park creators? He said when you write a
Yeah,
story, instead of going like, and then this happened, and then this happened, you have to be like, therefore this happened. You know what I mean? Like this thing
yeah,
happened, and because of that, we move forward, and because of that, we move forward. You know? Do you ever
yeah.
feel that in your story,
It's a
or is it
consequence.
more like, and then, or more than therefore? Sometimes I feel like my story has like
Yeah,
and
I,
then.
I, I that's, I mean, I try not to complicate short the story too much in a broader sense. Like at the end of the day, character A wants objective B, and they need to. The story essentially is them trying to get it, and your job as the writer is to make it as difficult as possible for them to get there. And when you think of it like that, it's nice and easy. All you have to do is I think like as an easy example, for example, you need to get to that door behind you. That's the story. That's the aim of the story. So you can think of any different, like lots of different things that could happen that stop you from getting to that door.
Yeah, you're gonna pop up a
So
goblin
for
right behind
example,
you.
like
Like,
yeah, or like you could get up out your chair, take a step to the door towards the door, and then someone comes through the ceiling.
I trip and break my leg. No, okay.
Yeah.
Nah, I'd be clumsy enough for that.
Like
Okay.
things like that. So anything like that can happen. You know what I mean? That's my approach to storytelling is to keep it simple and think of interesting things to trip the characters up.
What's your ultimate goal with writing? Do you want to become a film? Do you want to, I don't know, get like become a film or get a make it your full-time career, that's your objective? Or do you want it to be like as recognizable as like Stephen King books?
No, I just my main aim and probably my only aim is to be in a position where I'm able to make a full-time living from doing what I love.
Hmm.
Um, and that's the only thing I want in life. That's what I strive for every day.
Me too. I feel like one goal at a time, you know? And then when that happens, maybe you'll aim for
Yeah,
something bigger. I feel like humans should always
yeah.
aim for something.
It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Exactly.
You do.
Exactly.
You need something to drive you, don't you? You need something to
Yes.
drive you.
So, Richie, where can our listeners find your work?
Best place to go is Patreon. So if you just go on Patreon and search Richie Billing, Billing, you'll see me pop up. I think there's only one Richie Billing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
On Patreon anyway, that writes stories. And you can also go to richiebilling.com. And if you're interested in writing, there's loads of resources on there. I've got writing tools that I've made. I've got lots of guides, world building guides, writing tips, dialogue, character development, everything like that. And I also have a podcast called the Fantasy Writers Toolshed. And I just do interviews with all different types of people. But former FBI special agent on there who's a world-renowned expert in body language. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
really interesting. He's done over 10,000 interviews with like suspects and stuff like that. So he's very good at reading body language and lots of good advice and tips there. And yeah, lots of best-selling authors as well, like Adrian Tchaikovsky, Jennifer Armentrout, Anna Smith Spark. So yeah, there's always lots something new to learn there. Try and make it as informative as possible.
How did that podcast come about?
Oh, I started it years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I did it with a friend of mine.
Mhm,
So we did it together for about 2 years, and then I was gonna sack it off, because I didn't really want to do it on my own.
mhm.
But quite a lot of people listened to it, and I was like, oh, I'll give it a go on my own, but realized that no one's gonna listen to this voice for 40 minutes. So I decided to get guests in
Uh-huh.
and just got really cheeky and asked a few people I admired if they'd come on the show. And luckily they've said yeah. And it's gotten to a stage now where people come to me. So I don't even have to do anything.
That's awesome. So, if you have one advice you give to all the aspiring storytellers watching this podcast right now, what would it be?
For aspiring storytellers, right? I always remember when I first started writing and feeling the excitement and the enthusiasm that like comes with creating something. And when
Mhm.
you first experience this, it's one of the most special feelings, and it stays with you forever. It's like the first time you do magic mushrooms, for example. Like
Oh
you
my
remember that
God.
experience forever. But it is like a drug. And yeah, what you want to try and do is you want to capture it and you want to hold it in a jar and you don't want anything to damage it. And there's plenty to damage it along the way. You can probably reach a point where you're reading over stuff that you've written and you don't feel like it's very good. So then you start doing research online about how to get better at writing, and you'll start reading all these crazy rules and guidelines about writing, and it'll just sap your enthusiasm and your confidence, and then there's a good chance that you'll just quit and you won't carry on. So to basically avoid that outcome is just to don't like lose sight or forget that feeling, and try and keep it there as much as possible, and remember that it's the love of creating things that is why you do it.
Mhm.
um and that way you've got a better chance of finishing stories and projects.
Remember, guys, if you love writing it and if you love reading it, someone else will also love reading it as well. There's always people like yourself out there. Don't think you're the only one because that's literally impossible.
Yeah, great
Some
advice.
people hate Harry Potter, but Harry Potter is like a huge franchise, has its own park.
Yeah,
So, well,
great advice.
that's a wrap for today's episode of Podcast for Fun. Thank you so much, Richie, for joining us and sharing your incredible insights as a writer and an author and a podcaster. You know, you have years of experience, and it was very interesting to hear. Especially like your transition from lawyer to writer is insane. Never heard of that
Yeah.
before.
I didn't tell you the part where I ran an Irish pub in between as well. I'll
You ran
save
an
that one for
Irish
another
pub?
day. Yeah, in between lawyer and uh, the current job. But we'll save that for another day.
Yes. Maybe for another episode. Maybe you'll come back, you know? We never
I'd
know.
love to, yeah. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a lovely chatting with you, and thank you
Yeah.
everyone for listening as well.
So, to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with any fellow storytelling enthusiasts. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to explore, you can drop them in the comments or connect with me with any of my social medias at Podcast for Fun. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and we'll see you on the next episode of Podcast for Fun.